What a great celebration. So these young ladies are joining a family. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about what kind of family they're joining. And it's appropriate, especially at Thanksgiving. Yeah, probably the most, to me it seems like it's the most family of all holidays. I don't know about you, but we had a good time at our house. Lots of noise, lots of people, lots of food. It was good. This morning I nearly had a wreck. Just as we were going out the door, I noticed that there was some pie left in the cupboard. And I had not yet had enough calories, and I thought, Karen has not gotten out the door yet. I'll have pie. So I got the pie in a bowl. I put the ice cream on top of it. Now remember, just think of this as cereal and milk, okay? All right, cereal, milk, and fruit. This is apple pie with ice cream. And of course, no sooner have I gotten it in the bowl, Karen is out the door. I've got to go. So I take it with me. But I'm driving. So I put it in the back. Oh well, it was a good idea. But after we got on the freeway, Karen said, well, would you like me to feed you some pie? And I'm going, as a matter of fact. Now, the actual mechanics of being fed apple pie in the car is not a problem. I can do that. I mean, that amount of multitasking I can do. Drive the car, and she puts the stuff in. That was not the problem. She put the pie in my mouth. I closed my mouth. I nearly swooned. That pie was good. I mean, the freeway disappeared. Oh, man, this was good. Wow. I should have expected this. I mean, this is the best pie I've ever had in my life. But the problem is at our house, almost every time I eat pie, it's the best pie I've ever had in my life. We do pie at our house. Not me. I don't do, well, I eat pie. My wife, I discovered after I married her that she was an amazing pie maker. That's cool. But I don't know when she's made a pie last, because she passed this on to our children. My daughters and even my son make pies. And this pie that I had this morning, untainted by all that other stuff that had loaded the table on Thanksgiving. I mean, this was just, this was mainline. This was just pure pie. It was up to the standards. Mm-hmm. Now that may seem like a flippant way to get at the heart of the story that I told the children, but the magic of family is comprised of deep, serious stuff and all the commonplaces that link it together. These young ladies are joining a family. And today I want to talk about some of the traditions that mark that family. Jesus highlighted traditions that marked his family. And we won't cover all of them because you don't want to stay here all day. To begin with, when you go through this story, so you have this woman, who's bent over double. I love my Bible Friends version. Most troublesome trouble. And I love the part about she knew people, not by their faces, but by the shape and color of their laces. It's funny, but when you think about that, you think of the weight on one's life that would impose. So here she comes to the synagogue. And I'm going to use my imagination, but I think we know humanity well enough that this is not a stretch. When she came in, And the synagogue ruler saw her. He saw brokenness, grotesqueness, ugliness. He saw the distance between her and the ideal of a woman. And that distance was the measure of her unworthiness. She didn't really count much. Because if you count, you're up here at the ideal. And all that distance between the ideal and where you live is a measure of how unworthy you are. And then Jesus interrupts the church service and heals this woman. It's going to cause a scene. And the next thing you know, there's going to be all kinds of people here at this church looking for help. And we can't have that. I mean, it was going to interfere with stuff. And propriety will probably go out the window. And so he said what any good administrator would say. Lady, do that somewhere else. He didn't have the guts to say it to Jesus. If you read the story, he says it not to Jesus, but to the woman. But Jesus did not let her answer. Excuse me, sir. At your house, would you let your donkey go for a whole day without water? I'm laughing. My wife doesn't know this. This is a perfect setup. This morning when I was outside for my quiet time, I noticed the amount of water in Bolero's water trough. Bolero is her baby horse. I did not tell her how much water was in the trough when I came in the house, because if I knew if I did, I'd have had time to eat my apple pie. It's not empty. There was some water, but it's low. Now, my wife is not a Pharisee. She's just a horse lover. A good Pharisee, all of them, 100% of Pharisees, given the question that Jesus asked, 100% of them would have said, well, of course, I would not let my donkey go all day without water. That would be inhumane. Sometimes as we read these stories and we beat up on the Pharisees and stuff, we don't understand Jesus could do some of what he did because he was operating in a religious system that did have a powerful, highly developed ethical sensibility. And it included even animals. Jewish people had a clear understanding that life trumped ritual, even animal life. And while they had all these rules about Sabbath keeping, and they could be very punctilious, all of those rules would go out the window when they clearly saw that it was a choice between life and, quote, the rules. So when Jesus challenged the synagogue ruler, excuse me, wouldn't you untie your donkey? He couldn't say anything. Of course he would untie his donkey. And then he said, you see this woman? And then I love what it says. And Luke does this twice. This is not accidental, that he records this conversation. He says, you see this woman? She's been tied up for 18 years. Do you know how long that is? 18 years. And then he said, and she's a daughter of Abraham. There was no higher status. There was no more glorious name for a person in the Jewish community than that they were sons and daughters of Abraham. The synagogue ruler knew that he was a son of Abraham. I mean, he was somebody. He wasn't a 5th generation Jew. He was a 100 generation Jew. Jesus says, she's got everything you've got, bud. She's part of this family. So shut up about leaving her tied for another second. Never mind another day. These young women with their strong characters, their great faith, their keen minds, their musical ability. They are joining a family that celebrates all of that and is pledged to doing everything we can to include people who have none of that. This is the place where the distance between the ideal and where a person is not a measure of their unworthiness. Rather, it is a measure of their claim on us and on God for help and healing. The more deeply we can internalize this, the sweeter it will make our life together here, our own personal life. I've heard from a number of you. You still live. Many of you. Maybe I should say many of us. I keep thinking I've gotten past this, but maybe I fool myself. We live with the words of condemnation we heard when we were young, at home and in church and at academy and in grade school. We got clearly the messages, you ought to be better than you are. And the distance between where you ought to be and where you are is the measure of your condemnation. And we have lived with it for all our life. But it is a broken view of God. God is not blind, and he sees the distance between the ideal and where we are. And then, instead of busying his mind with condemnation, he busies his mind with strategies for helping us move a little closer, a little higher, reorienting our lives a little more toward the ideal, once again orienting ourselves. One of the ways that I see this most vividly, at least for me, it's a picture. In my last church, there was a guy named Orrin. He was in his middle 30s, nonverbal, in diapers. And whenever I would see Orrin, I would greet Orrin. Hey, Orrin, how you doing? I don't know that I ever saw the slightest flicker. Well, no, there were a couple of times when I could tell that he knew that I had either touched him or spoken to him, and he would turn away. But I kept hoping, maybe one day, maybe he'll look toward me, maybe. Now, when he turned away, did I draw back and go, what? Of course not. Metaphor, it's one of my kids. Did his mother turn away when he, for 30-some years, gave just the meagerest hint that he knew she existed? No. Church is family. And even if our brokenness is as dramatic as Orrin's was, and our ability to respond is as minimal as Orrin's is, we are still in the family. And the greater our dysfunction, the greater the responsibility of the Heavenly Father, the Heavenly Mother. At our house for Thanksgiving dinner, everybody was eating, everybody was making noise, but there was one person that was not eating. And in fact, this person was interfering with other people's eating. It was a problem. Cassandra was at our house. She was not the problem. For visitors, that's the associate pastor's wife. So Andreas and Cassandra were there, and so was Eden. And I think Eden had decided that Mom was not supposed to eat. Every time Mom would try to think about eating, Eden would protest. So, of course, Mom got mad, slapped her upside the head. Of course not. When you have family, it is not possible for an individual to have a problem. Because anytime an individual in the family has a problem, the family has a problem. We had a problem at our house. Cassandra couldn't eat. So I did what every granddad would do. I said to Grandma, "Can you help Cassandra?" And it worked. These young ladies are joining a church where every one of their gifts will be called to service. God needs you, Sophie. Where are you, Irina? Where are you, Charlotte? God needs you. He needs us. Luke 19 tells a story about Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus was a tax collector. Maybe in our day we would imagine him as a ruthless hedge fund operator, with the emphasis on the word ruthless. Tax collectors were understood to be unethical people, and they were rich, and the two were connected in their case. They were despised. Maybe a drug dealer, that very successful drug dealer, not a low-level guy. That's Zacchaeus. He hears Jesus is coming to town. He wants to see Jesus. He's a short guy. He cannot push through the crowd because there'd be somebody that might put a knife in him. So he climbs a tree so he can see Jesus go by. Jesus comes under the tree. "Zacchaeus, come on down. I'm going to your house today." Unlike with the woman bent over double, this time the crowd agrees with the Pharisees. When Jesus says, "I'm going to your house," the crowd says, "What? That's disgusting." Jesus goes anyway. And then there at dinner, Zacchaeus stands and makes this little speech. "Lord, I'm going to give away half of what I own to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone," and probably most of the people listening would have been going, "If?" But maybe I pushed the stereotype too far. Maybe he was more honest than I give him credit for. But he says, "If I have defrauded anyone, I'll pay him back 4 times. I'm going to fix things. I'm going to do restitution. I'm going to practice generosity." And Jesus says, "Hey, wait a minute. Hey, everybody, did you hear this? This is the evidence that this man is a son of Abraham. Because this man now is practicing our family traditions." At our house, pie is a tradition. That's pretty easy. In the family of Jesus, the tradition is generosity, restitution, community. God needs you, Charlotte. Yeah. God needs you too, Irina. So it's Thanksgiving. We've celebrated together as families, many of us. And our families are kind of elastic. You know, it's blood relatives and then friends of relatives and then friends of friends and roommates of friends of friends. And there's that sense that this family is something that reaches out. You can easily talk about the center, but the edge is actually very diffuse. There's no sharp edge. Because the tradition of the family of Jesus is to reach out and to include, to see the distance between the ideal and where we are as the claim of that person on God and on us. And we are all then together sons and daughters of Abraham.